Hi, my name is Brian Curtis, and I'm the founder of Decentralized Systems. And today I've got Don Stone from a nonprofit group here, and Ahmad Fattahi, who is a science director from TIBCO. Thanks, guys, for joining me.
Glad to be here.
Okay, so we'll start with you, Ahmad, since you're closer to kind of what I'm doing. Can you tell me more about exactly what you do for your business and how far you, maybe in the last year, what you guys have been working on?
Sure. I'm a director of data science at TIBCO, and we're a software company. We've been in business for 2.5 decades, and our business serves other businesses with all of their data and decision problems, with connectivity to their data sources, unification and massaging of the data, preparing the data, and then eventually the analytics, data science, and AI on top of data. Actually, in many cases, it leads to or helps humans with better decisions to run their business better. And I know it's something, Brian, that you deeply care about.
Yeah.
It's all about enabling humans to either delegate a mundane task of making decisions over and over and over, or a impossible task of going through a lot of data that our brains or our energy and time doesn't allow us to do. Get help from the machines and computers with all of the technology underneath, which can get actually sophisticated very quickly to get that done. It spans all the way down to the shop floor of a manufacturing facility, literally, optimizing processes on chemical or semiconductor manufacturing sites, to financial sector, to life sciences and pharma, and to name a few. There are a few more strong verticals too. And the past year, there have been, or there are, I should say, constant changes in the technology landscape. While we always want to push the envelope on what we offer to our customers, where I'm personally very much closer to what we call our AI applications or AI apps, where we go deeper into a specific problem sphere and build a package or application with artificial intelligence that acts on data and gets a specific task done with visual elements and the user experience, all of that. So that's on the vertical side. At the same time, we are not on an island. Our customers, every organization, they use our software while they are on AWS or Azure, or they have their own data centers. And because they're always a moving target, their technology is changing, we have to move with them. So this whole ship, you have to maintain it while improving it while it's moving. So that in a nutshell is what has kept us busy over the past year.
Yeah, I was watching, I think, a short video. Aviva does something similar, correct? Aviva has their own version of that, where they're kind of, you're monitoring equipment, and then you're letting AI make decisions as far as like how often to maintenance something, or you're monitoring, not just, are you monitoring human performance and equipment, or are you monitoring just like assets?
All of the above. Yeah, we actually have a good set of AI apps for people analytics, as we call it, as well.
Okay.
But yeah, most of it, I would say, the majority of the work is about the machines and the assets and processes.
Yeah. Well, I was an electrician for 25 years until I, started this business, and I could see where I would wish the company that I was working for at the time would have implemented something like this, because there's just so much stuff going on out there. And if you can allow software to kind of take some of the burden off of all the manual labor of trying to figure out where everything's at, and then, automate some of it, it makes your job way easier to plan your work. And yeah, it helps you make way better decisions. I think what I am doing is pretty synonymous with what you're doing. It's just kind of a different aspect of it, where mine is a little bit more human performance and yours a little bit more machine performance, but that's synergistic, definitely.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Don, tell us a little bit about what you've been doing over the last year for what kind of nonprofit groups you're associated with.
Oh, yes. Hello, everyone. I am the Chief Impact and Equity Officer, well, Diversity Officer for a membership-based organization called Center for Nonprofit Management, where I am responsible for actually leveraging what both of you do really well, is
Okay.
helping the nonprofit sector get the data, primary, secondary, and tertiary, and actually use that data to make decision-making possible. Because what happens in our industry, everything is so fragmented that we have a silo mentality that I, as a recovering corporaholic, I've been in corporate America for over almost 25 years, I'm really trying to debunk that entire system. So Brian, the things that your organization offers is exactly the type of stuff that we need to get moving. Because again, decentralizing the decision-making in a nonprofit sector takes out that burden of relying on the decision maker who may or may not be in the office, who may or may not wear multiple hats. And then of course, don't get paid enough. That's the biggest complaint there. So once we properly allocate as an industry what's needed from a data perspective, whether it's human data like Ahmad, human data like you, Brian, or machine learning, Ahmad, it's something that's kind of foreign in our space right now. So I'm just happy to be here just to collaborate with both of you to talk about those very things that are needed, because it makes our work more intentional and it also helps us get more done. So I'm just excited. Glad to be in this discussion.
Yeah, it sounds great. And I'm sure you're thinking the same things that I'm thinking is, when you're decentralizing decision making, it takes all the political divisiveness out of it, right? Because
yes,
you can't really we're finding that we're not growing as a culture and society because it's too easy to politicize something, and then it just divides the whole interest group. We all have the same interest. We all want to grow together, but there's when you have one person here, you end up with different groups that are just trying to compete with different agendas, and it just never works, right? We're seeing it just
and
doesn't.
you know what, Brian, my ecosystem in where I'm located, I support an ecosystem of 5,000 organizations with budgets from 0 to over 100 million. Think about that. So you talk about that.
Oh yeah. And that was one of my primary goals, is keep special interest groups out. Because if you can randomize out of a group and there's nobody really to influence, the whole group is working together, and there's no way to, let's say I have, this agenda, who am I going to go to if we're all working in a decentralized decision-making system to try and influence that group? I'd have to, all I can do is donate money, right?
Right.
Should be great. Yeah, donate money to the community. That's what it should be, right?
Right.
Yeah. And eventually my system, I think, will eventually go nonprofit. That was the direction I always wanted to go, is provide a system for the community to grow, and then let the community decide how much of the assets that, they, even if they're paying for the system, you could take a percentage of it and set it aside, and then use the same system for the community to decide how they want to disperse that money, to rebuild that community. I think there's a lot of problems we're seeing, especially on the West Coast. You're from Nashville, right, Don?
Correct. Yes. But I do have national clients that I support even in the nonprofit space. So this would be ideal, this type of work. And so, yeah, we're going to definitely stay in touch. Ahmad, you will be hearing from me as well.
All right.
Yeah. So on the West Coast, we're seeing a huge spike in homeless. And it's just within the last 24 months, it's gotten really way much more severe. So I'd be curious to see what it's like in both of your parts of the countries, or wherever you're at. Maybe you, Ahmad, first. I don't know where you're based. You're in Fort Lauderdale, or?
No. I'm in Northern California. I'm in the Bay Area.
Oh, you're in California. Okay. So I know California is seeing that also, correct?
Yeah. So we have. So I'm about 30 minutes south of San Francisco, and you mentioned nonprofits and the homelessness issue. You know, San Francisco has been a prime topic of concern, you know, for quite some time. And it's not a, you know, at least, you know, my conversation is not political at all. I'm just looking at the human aspect of it. I'm a technologist at heart, and it pains me, and it makes me, you know, wonder how this multifaceted problem could be resolved, or at least helped and mitigated. So from my angle, when I think about my local issues, like, you know, this homelessness issue, or, you know, wildfires are a big issue here in California. The other aspect is climate crisis. Everybody is thinking about connecting that to your topic of, or this topic of decentralization. I think technology can play a very significant role in helping any and every one of these crises. For example, for the wildfire issue, you know, Internet of Things, as we call it, this distributed network of sensors, and in many cases, local machine decision makers. They can play a huge role in not only collecting data from a distributed, vast geographical area. If they are equipped enough, or just slightly more advanced, they can actually be autonomous decision makers, and you know, cut out a lot of, or making local decisions based on local data, plus, you know, some global instructions, instead of relying on one central decision maker,
Right.
who is far from the local situation, who has only bandwidth for so much to absorb from all the geographical area and so many other issues. It has better security aspects, because not all the local and private data needs to be transferred to a central authority. So that's one example. You know, the same, a parallel story can be said about climate change and many of the disasters around the globe, like, you know, detecting leaks in pipelines for oil and gas. It can be instrumented so that it can be detected fast, and better AI can detect and weed out in false positives, so the trust in the system goes up. And eventually, it's some people, you know, fear or are scared that it's gonna, you know, push the human out of the loop. My view is that it's gonna boost and enhance humans' quality of life and decision-making process if it's done right. I have, you know, numerous examples of that. And a shameless plug, I'm publishing a book on Internet of Things in a couple of months, coming out, published by Wiley, on this whole topic of applying Internet of Things to various aspects of our lives. So I'm very passionate about this field, and I see a lot of parallels with this topic and your areas of activity.
Yeah, that's awesome. You know, and I always thought it didn't matter how good my ideas are, as long as I input my ideas into the group and then get feedback, you know, and as a group we can perfect ideas. You know, I think that there's no better outcome, right? I mean, we can all work together to just create the best ideas, but we're just kind of so separated. You know, COVID did a lot to harm the mental state of the country, right? When you get separated from people and you're not interacting as much, your mental health goes down, because you're just not, you know, you start to get delusional. It's just like somebody that lives in the mountains by themselves for 30 years, right? Go talk to somebody that hasn't interacted with the public for 30 years, and they're just going to be, you know, out of touch. And so, yeah, interacting or perfecting ideas is what I'm all about. So, yeah, do you have anything to say about that, Don?
Hey, I couldn't agree more. You know, it is, and I look at this space, because we live in almost two different worlds, and we're trying to create this new space. And we talk about these eco-social determinants of health, right? Everything from health services, homelessness, being unhoused. What does that look like? So, Brian, you had asked, what does it look like in our state?
Yeah. Nashville,
Tennessee has become one of the 10 IT cities in the nation. So what's happening? we have a lot of my colleagues, I used to live in San Diego, right? So we have a lot of our colleagues who are migrating to Nashville. And I don't even have the updated numbers, but there's so many families, over 100 different families are moving here every day.
Wow.
That it's forcing a lot of the gaps in affordable housing, you know, income, gender disability, early childhood education, employment, wages, housing, you name it. And so when we look at using data, and Ahmad, I really like the point that you said, you know, what does it look like? Is it taking the human aspect out of it? I'm with you. I don't think it is, because we have the ability to put human in. So Brian and Ahmad both, one of the things that we're doing within the nonprofit sector is taking those narratives. So we have that machine learning, that data that tells us, yes, this is happening. These are the predictable things we see. Here are the outcomes. Building what's called a logic model, which is basically our KPIs and how and why we're doing what we're doing. Is it sustainable? Are we addressing all of these needs? And then taking those and weaving in what we call our narratives. So making sure that we have a true narrative as a data point, right? So Brian, when looking at the product that you offer, you know, decentralizing decision-making also means we have an opportunity to bring the human back in and utilizing what I would call non-traditional data points to incorporate in these spaces. So I'll give you an example of something we're using now, even at the government level. So I get to do what's called collective impact, and I work at every level, right? So I have education, nonprofits, for-profits, government, and every municipalities, everywhere in between, okay? And so what we are doing now is asking people, hey, can we get a video of you saying what your experience is? Can we get a testimonial written? And now how can we incorporate that real life thing into the way we tell a story, or the way we capture data, and the way we use that data moving forward, so we can keep the human piece? Because in every space, Brian, what's funny, I'm always saying, what is the data not telling us? So
Right.
I'm always the person pushing that. What is it that we're missing? Because we all have, the data can tell us stuff, right? It's anecdotal, it's real, but there are also things and maybe context that we don't have. So I'd be interested to know how we're prepared to address that going forward, even with our traditional quantitative and our qualitative data at stake.
Oh yeah, like we said at the beginning, you know, what Ahmad and I are doing are very synergistic, because you really need both, right? You have to be able to take data points in from everywhere, and you have to hear the inputs from everybody who's seeing those data points at the same time, because, you know, they might say, well, that data is interesting, but it's still not taking into account this, this, and this. And then you're constantly evolving, right? It makes it so the evolution process happens much faster. Yeah.
Totally. And actually, I like to give you actually two very interesting real world examples of this very last point. First example is in one of my last jobs. I was in charge of helping our other product teams, software products, to do a better job, improve the customer experience, eventually the human experience on the other end. There were a lot of, you know, expert humans managing that whole process with intuition and some observations, customer interviews. They had a very good, you know, quote unquote, very good process, right? At some point, me and my team, we were in charge of leveraging data to help these decision makers to see how, you know, where the areas that they can improve. We found a few, but the most interesting ones were a couple of surprise areas that actually did take some digging, because initially we thought, oh, this cannot be right. One of the areas was, one of the specific examples was, it was a cybersecurity product that, you know, we would sell, and the intuition was we had visibility into how long it takes for the customer to provision, to install those, you know, 100 licenses. So we had a metric, you know, how long it takes for them to get to, I think, 50% installation. And there were literally campaigns to push or encourage the customer to get to that 50% KPI or benchmark as fast as possible. But the data showed that actually the customers who by certain measures are more successful at the end of the year, 1 year mark, are the ones that get to that mark or benchmark between a month and 3 months. The ones that get to that point earlier than the first 1 month, they're actually not as good. And you're like, no, this cannot be right. We looked into data, and I'm simplifying it. It took us a month to get to this point. But after talking to a lot of experts, and real customers, we realized that actually in a real world environment, in an IT organization, installing properly, provisioning a proper IT system so that they can get to that 50%. If you want to do it properly, it actually typically takes between a month and 3 months. If you claim you have done it in a week, something must have been wrong. You must have done something wrongly. So that was a very good example of how eventually the people who were decision makers about the product, about those campaigns, they were enabled by this data and logic and the machine learning underneath to shed light on a blind spot. That's one. The second one is shorter, so I'm just gonna say it in passing. How data can, again, bring in the human element to the decision makers. Actually, just last night, I read an article that the football club, soccer club, Manchester City, they're starting a pilot program to embed some sensors in the scarves they sell to their fans, to, of course, with their permission and all the privacy considerations, to exactly have or gain visibility into what situations gain their fans excitement or dismay or distress or happiness or jumping up and down. And that way they can fine-tune their product, their show, their players, their jerseys, whatever it is, even better, fine-tune it to their clientele. So that's another example that comes to mind. So I'm gonna pause here.
That's really good, Ahmad. I mean, there's no better outcome, right, than having the human element plug in your system the way it needs to be plugged in initially. The problem with having decision makers who's actually implementing what you're doing, right? You're appeasing the decision makers. Let's say a company is implementing your process. A lot of times they don't have the right information to implement what you're trying to do correctly. So if you combine both, you can speed up both processes super fast. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And if we can speed up anything in our sector called the nonprofit sector, bless us all, that would be great. And I love that. I love exactly what we're talking about here. So.
Well, it was wonderful talking to both of you. I hope to keep this conversation going. We'll stay in touch, and thanks for visiting me today. This has been a great podcast. I love talking about making progress in communities and business, because right now we're in a big constriction, and this is always what happens. The best ideas always come out of where we see the biggest problems. So yeah, absolutely.
I had a great time myself.
Thanks absolutely. Thanks, Brian, for hosting us today.
Yeah,
it's been wonderful.
Have a good one. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.